Good morning. So we're getting everyone started in, and thanks Allison for starting the recording. So this meeting is being recorded. While we're settling in, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Let us know your name and where you're joining us from.
I can't hear these people.
Is your volume up? Oops, where's the volume on this?
I don't know. I just hit.
And I think Janet, oh, perfect. You just muted yourself. That's great. Everyone's coming in muted so we can hear the speakers. So please stay muted while the speakers are talking. And go ahead and say hello to us in the chat. We're going to get started in a few minutes. While we're waiting for everyone to get in, I'll just go over a few housekeeping items. My name's Amber, and I'm a grant specialist from Maddie's fund. My pronouns are she, her. And if anyone has any trouble seeing me today, I have red hair. It's up in a ponytail, and I'm a middle-aged white woman with a blue t-shirt. My background is blurred because I'm in the middle of moving, and no one wants to see the mess that's going on behind me. So again, you are all coming in muted. We're going to have you stay that way during the 20 minutes of presentation. And then after our speakers are done, you can either unmute yourself to ask a question, or you can type the question in the chat. So I'm very excited today to be hosting the 5th huddle. So again, starting on November 22nd, we are going to pilot new approaches that open doors to adopters and volunteers and welcome our entire communities. We have 322 organizations signed up to participate, along with 16 national organizations as partners, and $200,000 in grants being awarded to participants. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we're talking about welcoming customer service, and we have Michael Bricker from C.A.R.E, which is Companion in Animals for Equity Reform, and Katie Muldoon from Mississippi MUTTS to talk about bringing opening and welcoming customer service into every aspect of your work. Michael is the Chief Strategy Officer and Director of Care Centers. He will be developing organizational strategy and sustaining that through all the management of CARE's departments. Prior to CARE, Michael was the former Director of Operations for the Shelter and Bed Program at Best Friends Animal Society. He spent most of his time in Texas as the interim executive director at different shelters, where he used his compassion and talent to get to know the staff, put the time in to connect with the community, all while saving more animals. And we also have Katie Muldoon, the founder and president of Mississippi MUTTS. While attending the University of Mississippi School of Law, Katie founded its chapter of the Student Animal Legal Defense Fund. She also interned at both the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine and the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the ASPCA, on Capitol Hill. Her experience working beside world leaders in animal advocacy have prepared and driven the success and efficiency of MUTTS. Prior to attending law school, Katie became involved at the local Humane Society, where she served as a volunteer, adoption counselor, rescue coordinator, and was elected to the board of directors. Through her involvement at this shelter, she realized a need for an alternative to euthanasia in Mississippi, and helped create her organization, Mississippi MUTTS. Wow, so this is a lot of great accolades that our speakers have today. And moderating the conversation, we have, as always, Gina Knepp from Michelson Found Animals, who is one of our funding partners for this challenge. Gina, anything you want to say before we turn it over to Michael and Katie?
No, but I'm super excited. Michael, you have no idea how much I have admired you from afar. So I'm jazzed about this conversation. And Katie, are you here? Am I seeing her?
I see in the chat, Katie.
I'm here, and it says Wendy Frink because I used the link in the recent email. So I apologize for my technical issues, but I am here just as Wendy
Welcome.
Frink, according to Zoom.
Excellent. So who wants to go first? Michael,
Well,
are you
cool.
taking the lead?
Yeah. Well, actually, Katie's going to start with a story, but I just want to let everybody know this is going to be interactive. We're going to be as casual as possible. We're just gonna really talk through this, me and Katie, this issue, and we want to start off with a story. So Katie, take it away.
Sure. I apologize I'm having all kinds of technical issues today. It's not my day for computers or phones. So thank you. This is really exciting and sounds like we have a really fun group. And like Mike said, feel free to interject and ask questions as we go. And we're hoping to make this conversational, if nothing else. And hopefully we can all walk away kind of with some new perspectives and ideas to carry with us into what we do. So I wanted to start out with a story that I told Mike about, and is kind of one of my favorite stories, just for, an ideal playing out of when, we've put our best foot forward and we've, really engaged with our supporter, our adopter, volunteer, whoever that may be. And we can see that that time and patience kind of come to fruition. So I'll give you the nutshell version, but we had an adopter recently who was looking for a dog that didn't shed. It was kind of a niche find, one of these smaller breeds that didn't shed, Shih Tzu type. And the hang up was that he has a row house and like 4 flights of narrow steps. So he was worried about the dog's ability to adjust to that. And we sent home 2 senior Shih Tzus who really were not cut out for that type of agility. And unfortunately, they never really got the hang of it, and it got worse instead of better. And so in a candid conversation with him, I just said, ultimately, I'm going to leave the decision up to you. I know that you've bonded with the dogs and obviously you're providing great care for the dogs, but in the best interest of the dogs and for you, there may be a better fit for you. There may be a better fit for these dogs where they're not going up and down 4 flights of stairs every day. But I'm going to leave the decision up to you. And he came back, pretty quickly within a day and said, I've thought it over, and as much as I love them and I've so enjoyed having them and I just can't imagine giving them up, I do think that it's in their best interest. And, I hate to turn them back over, but I'm going to write a donation to cover both of their adoption fees for whoever does take them. And I think it was just him not feeling like we told him no because he wasn't a suitable home, or feeling like, we said these dogs can do better than you. That conversation was never had. The ball was in his court and he got to make that decision. And he continued to stay a supporter. He stays up to date on the dogs. They found a great home where there's no stairs, and it worked out for everybody. He ended up finding another dog that didn't have the arthritic issues that these guys did. And so that's kind of a long-winded way of saying, we told him no, but we did it in a way where he still felt appreciated, he felt heard, and he never felt judged. And so that turned around to turn him into a donor and a lifelong supporter. So I think that's, like I said, we don't always get to see that time and patience come to fruition, but in that case we did. And I think a question that I'd like to start off with, and I know Mike can pick up on, is why does good customer service matter in our industry? I think we sometimes get into the pigeonhole of we're here for the animals. We're in this because we like animals. They come first. The people are kind of necessary evils to it all. And at the end of the day, if that adopter doesn't work out, there will be another one, or maybe there's a better one. Maybe that person's not the best anyways, so it doesn't really matter. But what I've found is that like realtors and like buying a house, if every realtor said, well, you're only going to buy one house and you're not going to come back for another 10 years, so it really doesn't matter, they wouldn't be very good realtors and they wouldn't be very successful. So, but what realtors know is that when their buyer has a good experience, their seller has a good experience, that seller has a whole network of friends and family and other people who will buy houses and other people who may need those services. And so their reputation and that experience that their buyer or seller has matters for what goes out into the community about them. And it's the same way for rescues and shelters. that that person may leave that day not finding the right animal for them, but they're going to go home and they're going to tell their neighbors, they're going to tell their sister, they're going to tell their second grader's teacher, they're going to tell, you know, everybody in their network what type of experience they had with that rescue or shelter. And that's going to depend on if those people go to you for an adoption, if they make their year-end check out to a local rescue or shelter instead of sending it off to the ASPCA, which is great, but some people like to go local, and you having that word of mouth will give you the edge. We have in Mississippi, we had a fantastic community and supporters, but people we didn't even know had their second grade class do donation drives, and elementary schools doing competitions on who could fill up the kiddie pool with donations first. We didn't know those people, but they knew somebody who had interacted with us, and that positive experience made all the difference. And we benefited from it at the end of the day. And I say we, the animals in our care benefited from it, which is why we're all here. So I think it's just important to keep in mind that every interaction can have a ripple effect. And whether that's an adopter, whether that's a volunteer who comes in for the day, or a foster, those, you know, even conversations at the PetSmart adoption event that last 5 minutes can make a huge effect that we don't see right away, but, you know, are so important. And so I think it was just, I just wanted to touch on why this should be such a big focus, because while the processes and the programs are vital, the experience is really what can sew all that together. So
Thank you so much, Katie. I just love that perspective. And, you know, I know we're talking about customer service and the title's customer service, and we're going to mention it throughout this talk, but I really feel that what we do in day-to-day shelters, rescues, and otherwise, it's really not customer service. You know, a customer is a person or organization that purchases goods or services from a business, and I don't feel that that's what we do at all. And I think that is probably where a lot of our issues stem from. I think that matters. You know, we call it customer service, and that's how we kind of feel about people that are coming in. But what if we started treating people like family or friends? You know, and we started off at that point. Everybody that comes in, I mean, you know, you don't have to get along with everybody. You know, I have an uncle I don't talk to. He's not the best person to be around, but when I have a conversation with him, it's different than I would, you know, having a conversation with a stranger that I don't know. So I think that really should be our guiding star in all the conversations that we have and the relationships that we're trying to build with people. It's really, you know, thinking about people that are coming into our organization as family. They want to do the same things that we want to do. They want to help out animals just like we want to do. They're looking for a good experience. And I think if we really started thinking about it in that way, it would change the way we do handle things day to day. I know it's super busy working in an animal shelter and a rescue, and we're constantly getting phone calls and emails about animals. And I think if we truly felt that, you know, these people, or we truly kept thinking that these people are the way that this animal is going to get out alive, and these people really care about this animal, and this is somebody that we want to help, we'll be more apt to answer that email quicker, or to call them back a little faster, or to figure out a way to answer their questions, or to, Katie mentioned in our call recently, you know, just listening to them when they talk about their dog that just passed away. You know, I know so many times we hear from people that are adopting a dog or want to adopt a dog or cat. They tell us the story about, you know, Fluffy that they had for 15 years. And they tell us all about Fluffy and her favorite blanket and her favorite toys, and, you know, how special she was. And we hear these stories sometimes multiple times a day. But when Katie was talking about that, it just resonated with me. It's going through those things, because if that was your aunt or uncle or cousin or mother or father telling you that, you'd listen and you'd respond, and you genuinely, you know, care about them and that story. And even if you were doing 100 different things, you're going to give your family member that time, and you're really going to listen. And I think that's where a lot of this stems from. Maybe we just stop talking about customer service, because I really don't feel like that's what this is. So Katie, what does good customer service look like in your rescue?
Sure. So I think customer service is something that, unfortunately, I think we can all agree comes to some people naturally and does not come to other people naturally. And sometimes acknowledging that means finding the right fit for staff or volunteers, right? Um, and so, anyways, in thinking about this and in answering your question, trying to articulate that breakdown, because I think for the people who it comes naturally for, it's conversational, it's natural reactions. You don't always have a name for your methodology, but in trying to evaluate what a shelter rescues customer service is, I think it's important to make sure that some boxes are checked. So some pieces that I have found is staying positive, patient, and prompt, empathy, and clear expectations. And I can repeat those: positive, patient, and prompt, empathy, and clear expectations. And some examples of those would be, one, I think, and Mike and I talked about this earlier, but it's so important to acknowledge what this experience means on the other side. We talk a lot about adopters because I think that experience is usually at the forefront for us. And it's kind of that often it's that one-time experience, right? They come in, you kind of get a clean slate, you get to put your best foot forward, and they leave, and their experience was either good or bad. With volunteers, sometimes it's ongoing. We have our laundry Nazis that will have a great day today, and tomorrow they're in a bad mood, and Thursday they come back anyways. And it's more of a roller coaster, I think, in managing some of those experiences, if you will, because they're ongoing. But I like to use adopters because it's a little more clean cut. So for the adopter, acknowledging what that experience is for them, talking about and being candid, and I think we're all relating here, but the dead pet stories, right? We listened to those, and I listened to one over the weekend, and his terminology was that the cats became part of the road. And I had to sit there with a smile on my face and listen to how he described it. And it was not my favorite thing. And I can't get that phrase out of my head now. But that's what we do in these engagements because it means something on the other side. But for people who are coming in searching for a new pet, they're thinking about their last pet. They're thinking about what that replacement means for their family, or for so many families, especially over the quarantine, they got their first pet, and that was exciting. And so many young adults who, were working from home finally got their first cat or their first dog. And that excitement, I think, is so important to hone in on, because our engagement with them can either make that experience even better, or it can dial back, them coming in with that little kid on Christmas morning feeling. And so I think sometimes just acknowledging that maybe they're kind of weird, and maybe they're telling too much information about how their dog died or their cat died, but, understanding that this doesn't come around a lot for these people, and this may be the next pet they get in the whole next 10 years. So let's really make this experience count for them. And so that would be staying positive, right? Just that engagement, even if it's, again, kind of an awkward conversation. What does that patience look like? Taking the time, showing them another dog. They fostered this one, it didn't work out. Being willing to say, let's try it one more time. And then Mike talked about the promptness. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth, but we're finding that motivation to get back to them a little sooner, make that phone call, checking the emails at the end of a busy day, even though we're really in the 11th hour. And then the empathy, I don't want to hone in on that too much, but again, that empathy for acknowledging what this experience is on the other side, even though our staff is stretched thin, or our volunteers are stretched thin, or we're actually packing up from this adoption event. So we were kind of planning on leaving, but okay, we'll hang around for another half hour. And then one that I was thinking about, more recently is clear expectations. And I think this is where it connects to the fosters and the volunteers. So those who have more of a longer term relationship with the shelter or rescue, and making their experience a positive one often has to do with what expectations they're coming in with and what expectations we're giving them and managing. Not to just ramble on, but we have had great feedback from fosters and a lot of foster retention, but we had one foster who vocalized that she had a horrible experience. And when it came down to talking to her about it, she didn't read the packet, and she said that she expected it to go like the other rescue she had fostered for, which was a lot different than us. They had they had a much more extensive adoption screening process. And when she fostered a group of puppies, she expected the house visits, the vet references, the kind of jumping through all the hoops. And that was where her comfort and security came from in handing the animal over. And that's not our process. And so for her, we thought we gave her the material she needed, but maybe it should have been more of a conversation, and maybe we should have reiterated what our process was going to look like, and that it wasn't like the rescue she came from. But I think, we could have had she could have had a more positive experience if that had been addressed sooner than after the fact. So I want to identify, no one is perfect, and we all get bad feedback, and not everybody's going to have a great experience, but using those bad experiences and that feedback and acting on it. And sometimes it's setting up a mechanism for feedback. Do you have a survey? Are you doing follow-up calls? If someone leaves, are you, finding out why? And so anyways, those are just a few pieces that I think break down what customer service can look like in our field.
Thank you. And I really like that, because people do have those mechanisms, surveys, and they ask for that from the public. But I mean, only ask if you're going to do something with that information. I feel like that's important. People need to see that, you're trying to make those changes. I think that's all part of good customer service. But I also want to acknowledge the barriers to good customer service, or relationship building in shelters and rescues. I mean, I know firsthand how difficult it is. I mean, it's super busy, especially right now. I think it's always, but even right now more than ever, maybe we're low on staff. We don't have a lot of people to do these 1,000 things that are coming in. But again, I at least in what I've done and what I've talked to my staff about is really just focusing on all of our motivations. What are we there to do? We're there to get this animal out of our shelter, our rescue, and into a great home. And we literally can't do that without building these relationships, taking that extra time, personalizing the experience that these people that are coming in that want to help save this animal that's with us. We can't do it without that. I think especially right now, what I've seen going from a southern state like Texas, and now I'm in New Jersey, Pennsylvania area, is that I'm seeing the sense of urgency isn't there that it once was. I have people that are very close to me, amazing people, amazing adopters, that literally cannot find an animal, or they're not being accepted at different shelters and rescues, or they're submitting applications, sometimes 10, 15 applications, and not hearing back by a single one. And I think that's tragic in a sense, and I know that it's not done with ill intent. I know it's because we are super busy, but I do think that the priority has to be the relationship. Us as, animal people the sooner we realize that we are not going to get out of this. We are not going to save these lives in the amount that we want to without people, and really focusing on the people end of things. We're just going to be spinning our wheels. And I see it constantly. People need communication. People need to be heard. People need to be seen. People need to feel that they're part of the process. And we have that power to do that. But sometimes the priority that we have in shelters and rescues doesn't align with that. And I think it really goes back to that family aspect. Like, how would you treat your aunt, uncle, cousin, friend, whatever, when they were coming in or asking you about an animal or asking you about really anything? You'd be attentive, you'd respond, and you'd go back to that. And sometimes you do it quickly if they asked you to, or if you knew that there was a situation that they really needed help with. And this is one of those things, that animal needs help. That animal needs to get out of your shelter and rescue and someone else, so you can accept one of the other ones that are waiting to come in. And you can only do that with working with a sense of urgency. And then I don't want to make a blanket statement. I know there's plenty of shelters and rescues that are moving with that sense of urgency, but I think being up here in the northern states kind of disconnects you from what is going on every single day down in these southern states. A good friend of mine runs a shelter still in South Texas, and the shelter has a capacity for 80 animals. And out of nowhere, they usually get maybe 3, 4, 5 animals a day. They receive close to 50 animals in one day. They have to move with a sense of urgency every single day because those situations are happening right in front of their face. The motivation is right there all the time. But for us that are a little bit further from that happening in our shelters and rescues, I think it's important to really, keep that front in mind and understand that less barriers, better customer service are going to help things that are happening thousands of miles away. And we have that ability here in these northern states, but without good customer service, good relationship building, we're just making a bottleneck for ourselves, and we're causing animals to needlessly, not be able to make it out of shelters and rescues, maybe sometimes even right down the road. So I think it's really important to remember what our motivation is, remember that guiding star, and to treat people like people. Katie wrote, it's like being treated like family while finding family, and I think that is just so profound. She just posted that, or just put that in our little chat. And I think that's it in a nutshell. I mean, if we want to help, if we want to do these things, and I know we all do, and I know we're all working so hard, but customer service or relationship building or family relations, whatever we want to call it, is literally one of the most important things that we can focus on during our day.
And I think to piggyback off of that, considering, our own family, I know I can speak that multiple members of my family have been put through the ringer, right? Our families, who doesn't know someone who's been denied by a rescue? And we're like, and sometimes they even throw out a name. They're like, our friend, our so-and-so, like, geographically runs one in a different area, or we would adopt from them, but like, we're a good person, we swear. And it's so frustrating to hear, and it's like Mike Bricker, he's a pillar of animal welfare, and
oh my gosh,
you probably know a million people that have been denied, and like they probably have you on their app, and it's definitely so frustrating. And
I think that's a good. Oh, sorry. No, I think you're completely spot on. It is super frustrating. But then again, I also want to acknowledge that there's sometimes that we have to say no. And I think you have great points on this. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we tend to be very open about our process. We don't have a lot of hurdles. We do ask for, in our app, we call an application survey, whatever you want to call it, about, and I'm upfront that it's really for the purpose of getting adopters thinking about these things. Do you have a vet that you're planning to use? Have you used them in the past? Do you mind providing their contact? I've probably called one vet or called a vet 1 to 2 times in the last 3 years because we just don't use that as a screening mechanism. But we also, do a lot of puppies and kittens. And to me, they're a lot more flexible. They're a lot more adjustable. There's less risk and liability. When we get into the adult dogs that maybe have behavioral issues, and if put in the wrong situation, could be a risk or liability, we tend to screen a little bit more, and it's mostly conversational at that. But sometimes it's going to come up that it's not the right fit, that you have told me that you plan to let your dog run around and you live very close to a highway, and the dog, I know will run off given the opportunity. It's just not going to be the right fit. But how do we make those conversations less harsh? And how do we avoid the word no? Because this is a person who's raising their hand and saying, I'll take one, I have a home, right? And there are literally 1 million pets sitting in shelters that need a home to go into. So let's use that home. And maybe it's not the right home for the dog that is a runner that we know, but maybe it's a perfect home for the next dog in line.
Those senior Shih Tzus would have been perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, they're going nowhere fast. Right, but it's acknowledging, how do I make this work instead of should I make this work? And anytime we have somebody raising their hand saying I have a home, it's using that approach. How do I get an animal in this home? And maybe it's not the animal that they picked. And sometimes they're not going to like that answer no matter how you phrase it. And that's just unfortunately kind of part of life, is that some people are not going to like being told what they think is no. But a lot of people, in a conversation and explaining why, and really saying, we want to find you an animal, we will bend over backwards to get an animal into your home. We're sorry it's not this one, but trust us, you wouldn't have been happy anyways. So I think, yes, unfortunately, those conversations have to be had, like Mike said, but find a way to turn that person into a foster, or again, find that other animal, connect them with your sources. We do that all the time. We say, we may not have something in our foster network right now, but these are the shelters we pull from. And if you stay on their website and you look on their Facebook pages and you find something, we'll bring it up with our next batch. Empowering them a bit to make good on our promise. Hey, we will put something in your home, and we're not saying no to everything. We're just saying no to this one dog that has already run away 3 times. Getting a bit creative sometimes is all it takes, and making people feel appreciated, even if that conversation is not what they wanted it to be. And one story I was going to say, because it's just my favorite clip of TV of all time, is on Modern Family. Cam and Mitchell go to stop by to adopt a kitten at this pop-up adoption event, and they say, great, we'll take this one. And the girl goes, okay, so here's our application, and hangs over a stack of papers and takes the kitten back and says, and we'll line up the home check and this and this and this. And Cam says, oh, I'm sorry, I thought there was 1 million cats in the world, and we said we'll take this one, and you said, oh, thank God. And I think that's really how we should approach it, is there's 1 million cats in the world that need homes, and you say we'll take this one, and we say, how many more can we send with you? And so just changing that. And again, if it was your Uncle Larry who said, I'll take a cat, you'd probably hand it over a bit easier because there's that familiarity. And so not that we have to necessarily, diminish all conversations or evaluations, but starting to approach it as if that was somebody that we trusted a little bit more.
Definitely. Just to sum it up, I know we're probably running a little bit long, but that's okay. But it's humanity. It's treating people like humans, starting off with trust, instead of starting off with judgment. I think for far too long in animal welfare, we've started off with judgment, giving them the applications, checking all their things, instead of realizing that this is a human that made the choice to come in to save one of the 1 million cats, and just saying, okay, thank God. So thank you so much. And we're open for some questions.
I love all of this. I could put the Katie and Mike show on my channel and watch that with Modern Family. This was so great. Thank you both so much. And the other
Thank you.
point too, Mike, thanks for summing up all of your great points too. The other thing I think that Katie said that I really wanted to uplift was it was something along the lines of, instead of thinking, should I make this work, thinking, how can I make this work? I think that's another great approach. And if you're watching it, when you were talking about like hearing the stories about people's animals who have passed, everybody who has their camera on, everybody was nodding. And yeah, and now everybody's nodding again. So I think it really was candid and it touched home. Gina, did you have any questions you wanted to start to lead us off? And again, folks, encourage you to put your questions in the chat as well.
Absolutely. Thank you both for sharing with us today. And I know that we've focused on adopters, and in my heart, in my experience, those were the easiest people to be great and to provide great customer service to. But for many of you that are in organizations that have pet food pantries, where you're dealing with the enforcement side of this business, someone coming in who has to pay a ticket and they're not so happy, those are the more difficult customer service moments. So that's where you try to pick your favorite relative and treat that person with the same kind of love and respect. I guess maybe if you could talk a little bit about the hardest part is, how do you train people to do that? Right? So, I mean, your parents should have done that, or it's in your DNA, but teaching people that love for others, respect for others is so challenging.
So if I could just go, Katie, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this too. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think it has to be a cultural change for your shelter and rescue. It has to be something that, that you practice day in and day out with your employees, with your volunteers, with your donors. It just has to be ingrained. And I do think that there's people that this comes more naturally to. And I think we can be strategic in how we position them within the organization. But I do feel like humanity is something that is inherent. I don't think it's something that we have to really teach as much as, grow as a culture of our organizations. When people see other people and how they interact and how they're handling these conversations, they'll start to do the same thing. And I think it's about breaking down that we have to be professional at work. I completely understand, but it's a little, letting people know that it's okay to have, these conversations, to show that they truly care about the person that's talking to them. And it doesn't have to be so binary. So, black and white, this is the way we do things and this is the way we've always done it. No, these are people with real situations and real conversations to be had. And I think supporting our staff and volunteers to have those conversations. And if you have those great people that this comes more naturally to, put them front and center, and let people see how they do things.
Thanks, Michael.
And I think to piggyback off of that, when I have overseen a staff that there were obvious extroverted, if you will, or people, type members, pairing them up with the more reserved or the less tactful usually helped pull up that second person, even if it was a bit of mimicking and using that as practice. And I think, the first interactions may be rough, but typically I think it can be a learned behavior, and it can be, even at the superficial level, that's fine. Smiling and nodding gets you a lot of places. And I think, especially for these short interactions and sometimes negative ones, smiling and nodding can get you through. But training that, like Mike said, is cultural, and it's usually that mimicking comes from an ingrained culture. And so if everyone else on the staff is handling these situations positively, it's a lot easier for that newer or less experienced member to pick up on that than if you are rectifying a culture of, that lack of customer service, that culture of judgment. And so really, I think identifying what your strengths are and fixing that before trying to train those pieces, like Mike said.
I think you're both really spot on that we learn most of our behaviors by watching others do it. Definitely a culture thing. Emily had a great comment, Emily Wood, who is in Florida now, right? Thoughts on customer service in the field. They don't have anybody to mimic, usually working very independently and trying to balance, enforcement, investigations, and safety, but still providing incredible customer service. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So at my last shelter, I oversaw our field services department. And I think what's important for field services officers is to get out to the community without a call being had. Just get out to any community gatherings or to the local religious spaces or to the farmer's market or to the dog park, and get out with that community that, in their normal day-to-day, they're going out and they have to enforce things with no enforcement at all, and just going out and talking to the community. I mean, I think that's a good way to really humanize the situation. I think field officers, unfortunately, every call that they go on, it's normally not for something good. They're not generally, saving a kitten out of a tree. It's more of they see some pretty rough things. So that can kind of, I think, filter, and since they are by themselves, that could kind of lead the direction they take when having these interactions. But I think the more time that they have to go out and meet the community for good, positive things, that will help change their internal focus on what they should do and how they should handle those other situations going forward.
Yeah, A plus on that. I can't remember who it is or what state they're in, but there's a director who essentially directs his field officers to go into the Starbucks, even if you don't want a coffee, and introduce yourself to someone that's in your community. And that's along the same lines. Get to know people in the places. Jen had a really great comment, going out and volunteering with organizations that are in the neighborhoods that you serve, where your shelter is located. Attending those events helps you meet people in a good place, right? And then when the enforcement, if it has to occur, you may already have a relationship established with the community.
And one more thought on that. I think that's something that came up when on the enforcement side of things is like checking our language and what we're saying, because I do feel like that is a big part of things. Language matters. So, there was a few times early on when I was overseeing this animal service department that they would, the area that needed us the most, they would say, oh, the rough part of town or worse words, and I think that all plays into it. If we think that that's the rough part of town, how are we going to handle the people that really need our help in that part of town? We're automatically going to think about, oh, this is the rough part of town. I have to put up my defense. I have to, broaden my shoulders and handle this interaction like that, instead of just going in. And these are just people just like the rest of us at our shelter. And, and most of our animal services officers, lived in those communities that needed help. So they're no different than us. Everybody's treating people again like their family, going forward with that aspect. I mean, I really feel like that's the best way forward.
Yeah, and I love too how the chat is kind of answering some of its own questions, how that question was posed, and then Jennifer answered it, and then Mike answered it. So I see, everyone's sticking together. There was also a great note too about how the customer service, not just in the field, but in different parts of your shelter, right? So you've got your front desk staff, but then you might have a different team who's actually working with the animals or showing the animals to the adopters, and that kind of culture of customer service, rather than just like, oh, I show you the cats and I don't really talk to you, but like Katie said, smiling and nodding. I feel like smiling and nodding has led me to be this far in my life and gotten me successfully to where I am, just as a person. But then Donna Brown made a really great point that we are the people that volunteers are watching to model that behavior. So again, just like in the field or at another part of your shelter, to make sure you're modeling that behavior. So we are at 15 till the hour. This went by so fast. Again, I could watch the Michael and Katie show all day. Katie, Michael, or Gina, thank you all so much for being here. We are going to be on the forum so we can continue this conversation. If your question didn't get answered, Michael and Katie will be on the forum to answer it. We're happy to help too. Katie, Michael, Gina, anything you want to say in closing? We covered so much great stuff.
Just thank you so much, everybody that attended. If you have any questions, yeah, reach out to us on the forum. I'd love to, continue this conversation.
Absolutely. The more we talk about it, the more attention we pay to it, the better we become.
Love it. Thank you all so much. Again, Katie, Michael, and Gina, we so appreciate you. I look forward to seeing everybody on Thursday, again at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to continue more about customer service, where it's how to market to your entire community. And that's going to be featuring Heather Owen from One Tail at a Time and Heather Friedman from Lifeline Animal Project. So we look forward to seeing you on the forum, and we look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Thank you again, everyone. Please continue to take good care of yourselves so you can take care of the pets and people in your community. Stay safe, and thank you for all you do.